Hello there, it's Miss Stone here, and I've gotten quite a few questions about our supplies and procedures for painting in the art room. So I thought I would make a quick video covering exactly those topics today. But before we talk about our paints, our brushes, our water container, we're actually going to start with something else that is super important, which is paper. No matter how good a quality you have for your painting setup, if you don't have the right paper, it's not going to matter. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're using at least 80 weight paper. Anything less than that is really just going to soak up the paint immediately like a sponge. You can't paint with watercolors on printer paper. It's just no good and it tends to go right through the paper. So 80 weight paper is what you want to look for. I use a brand called Art First, A-R-T, the number 1, S-T. I buy my paper in the size 12 inches by 24 and then just cut it down to the sizes that I need. And that's also a little bit more affordable. So make sure you start with some good quality paper. So next up, we are going to talk about our watercolor paints. I opt for the good old standby for elementary Crayola, but I make sure to get the education watercolors, not the washable brand, because watercolor paints are already water soluble. They're gonna wash off of most surfaces and out of most things. When you buy the washable brand, what that means is it's been mixed with detergent, which does make it a little easier to clean up, but also loses a lot of the saturation and quality that you would find in the education watercolor set. So those are the ones that I get. I like to get these in a class pack. They're usually around $50 or so on Amazon, kind of depends on the year, but they come in sets of 24 that are in the complete pack like this. And then I believe another 12 that are loose frames. This is what it looks like when you first get them. You've got the full range of colors. Black is down here, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, or violet, which is really hard to tell from the black in the beginning. And then brown at the very end. And they also come with their own brush, which is actually pretty good quality. And so I would really recommend it for this reason. Now, what I like to do is I take the whole palette out and then I do some rearranging. This is one of the things I love about Crayola is that you can pop these out. So I take out the black. Black tends to get mixed in with other things and makes everything really muddy and icky. So I only usually get that out if we're doing a specific project. I slide the red over, then the orange. I leave the yellow where it is, pop the brown out. Again, I only put that in the frame if we're doing a particular project, like if we're mixing skin tones or something like that. Slide purple over, slide blue over, and then green. That one popped out. Yellow ends up being kind of there by itself. And the reason we do this is I like yellow to not have any what I call next door neighbors, because yellow is the most prone to getting dirty. That's still gonna happen when the kids are mixing colors. There will definitely be some contamination in there, but when it's got colors right next door, they tend to get mixed in all of the time. So I like to have those empty spaces around the yellow. Now, as far as brushes go, I think the ones that come with the Crayola paints are absolutely fine. Because we're in the art room, I like to provide a little bit of a variety of sizes and shapes. So I use a brand called Royal. I like to put out the flats for students. These are really nice. So this is what it looks like. This is size 12 of the Royal brush. And so then I buy these flats. These are really nice, I tell the kids, for covering big areas, like if they're painting a sky or an ocean to get nice even color. And then I also do rounds. These are also the Royal brand. I believe this is a size 6, and then this is a round tip. I also usually have other sizes available for students depending on the kind of projects we're doing, but these are the basics that I like to put out for every project. Next, let's talk about water containers. I think that can actually really make or break the amount of mess that occurs during painting. So I really like to use these. These are actually a 2-compartment dog food and water bowl or cat food and water bowl. I got these in a pack of, I think, 12 from Amazon. I think they were around $20 for the set of 12. I really love the fact that they're so wide. That keeps them really stable. It prevents students from like knocking cups over and a lot of water spills. And I also like to use the two compartments. We fill one halfway with water, and then the other gets a cut in half cellulose sponge, which we'll talk more about during procedures. Then to finish off my setup, I like to put everything on top of this tray, which is actually the lid of a storage container from the Dollar Tree. We use a ton of storage containers, and I like to use every part of it. So this lid becomes a tray, and I believe this lid is from a, I think 5.92 quart storage container from Dollar Tree. So these lids actually end up being the perfect size for our setup, but also I love that you can see there are these little hooks where it would attach to the container itself, but I kind of love that that helps hold our water dish in place and stops it from sliding around a bunch when students are cleaning their brushes. So now that we've talked about setup and supplies, let's talk about procedures. When students are first learning to paint, I talk to them about using ballerina brushes. This is a terminology that I've borrowed from Cassie Stevens, who is another art teacher, and this is what we're talking about. I'm gonna move this aside and I'm gonna bring out my demo brush because I treat this brush a lot rougher than I do with our nice brushes. So when we talk about ballerina brush, what we mean is we want to imagine that our brush is like a beautiful ballerina and the bristles are her tippy toes. We want to keep her standing on her tippy toes, dancing around the paper. I have students practice on their hand to show me how responsibly they keep her standing on tippy toes. We never want to see what we call the booty scoot. We never want to see her sitting down on her bottom because it doesn't make nice painting and it is not a nice way to treat our brushes. So we make sure to talk about that. We also talk about the different parts of the paintbrush. This is the handle, this is the ferrule, and then these are the bristles. We want to hold our paintbrush like a pencil, right where the ferrule and the handle come to meet. Ballerina brush, standing tall on her tippy toes, never ever doing the booty scoot. Now when it's time to paint, we talk about the fact that watercolors that come in a pan like this need to be woken up to work. And to wake up our paint, we need to use water. So we choose one of our brushes, we dip it in the water, and then we're gonna find the color we want and we're gonna pet, pet, pet till it's shiny and wet. So if I wanna wake up my yellow, I pet, pet, pet till it's shiny and wet. Pet, pet, pet till it's shiny and wet. And then I can see that I've got color on my brush and I'm ready for painting. Now during this step, I actually have students show me how to pet a cat. I have them practice on their arm. So we talk about petting being like this, where we lift and pet, lift and pet. We don't want to pet a kitty back and forth like this, or we're going to get bit. And our paints and our paper are the same way. We lift and pet. That kind of helps them stop from doing the booty scoot or like scrubbing their brush on the paper. And I remind students that we want to keep our paints super shiny. A lot of times you'll see students are pressing harder and harder on their paintbrushes, thinking that it kind of works like a marker. And if the paint stops working, that it is just an issue of them needing to press harder. So that's something that needs a lot of reinforcement, especially with the younger students, to recognize that they need to keep adding water to their paint to make sure that they're nice and shiny for their paint to work. So now that I've got my paint on my paintbrush, I'm ready to pet the paper and I've got my nice little design. I also like to talk to my students about pointing the handle the direction they want to go. We call that point and pull. So when I painted this line, my handle was pointing down so that I could paint down. Now if I'm going to paint this direction, my handle should point that direction and I pull. If I want to paint up, my handle should point up and I'll wiggle up. The reason we talk about point and pull is sometimes you will see students that push their brush like that. So we really try to reinforce point and pull in the direction that you want your brush to go. Now, once I'm all done with a color and I'm ready to switch colors, we have a very specific procedure for how we do that. I'm gonna go ahead and pull my water tray back over here so you can see. And it's gonna seem a little over the top how controlled this is, but I find especially with our youngest students like TK, Kinder, but even first and second, having a really concrete structured procedure for how to clean their brush helps prevent mixing up their colors and just gives them something a little bit better to hold on to and remember the more we can make it a structured process. So I tell students, if I want to get a new color, I'm gonna have to clean my brush first. I usually model what it looks like if I go from one color into another color and how they get mixed up and why that's not a good idea. But once we've talked about that, then I show them this procedure. So we want to go into the water and push all the way down until our bristles stick out like this. I tell them this is the one time they're allowed to do the booty scootus because this is how we clean our brush. We gotta make sure to spread those bristles out so that the water can get up inside there and really clean out the bristles. Then I tell them that we're gonna draw the letter X. We're gonna draw the letter X 10 times and we're gonna draw it slow and we're gonna count together. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now you might have clocked the fact that that's actually only 5 X's, but we count each of the lines as we go, and that doesn't seem to be a problem. So after I've done 10 X's touching the bottom of the water, then I go onto the sponge and I do an X 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the reason I do this is it gets the drippies off my brush and stops my brush from being too filled with water, but also it gives students a little bit of feedback. I tell them, if you see a big yellow X on your sponge or whatever color you just used, that tells you that your brush isn't clean and you need to wash it again. Or it might be that your water is super dirty and it's time to change it. Now I tell them that it's time to change their water when they touch the bottom and they can't see their bristles anymore. If it's cloudy, that's fine, but when they can't see the bottom of their dish and they can't see the bristles when they touch the bottom, it's definitely time to do a water refresh. So now that I've cleaned my brush, I did my 10 X's in the water, 5 X's on the sponge, then I'm ready to get a little more water on my brush and wake up my next color. I think this time I'm gonna wake up orange. Pet, 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 till it's shiny and wet. Pet, 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 till it's shiny and wet. Now, something else I encourage students to do is to look out for puddles. And I tell them, especially when they're doing something like a sky, sometimes students, they let their color be too dark. You see a lot of students who either it's too light, and then I tell them they need to pet their paint more times, or it's too dark and they're using so much paint that they're kind of wasting it. And we don't have a dark blue sky, we have a light blue sky. So I show them that you can actually just dip right into the water. So I'm dipping into the water off camera and then putting that on top of the color I already have. And that is gonna make the color lighter and it's gonna give me more paint to spread out. And I tell them, if you see puddles on your paper, that's fresh paint. Don't go back into your palette and get more color if you have puddles on your paper. Treat that like your paint. Dip into the puddle, spread it out, and if you need to fill in another spot, dip into it like it's fresh paint, and then spread that out in the spot that you need it. Then at the very end of class, I make sure to have everybody stop what they're doing. I count them down, and then we make sure that we clean all of our brushes. Any ones that got used, we clean them all, even if we think we didn't use them, just to be safe. 10 X's in the water, nice and slow so we don't splash. 5 X's on the sponge, and then we're good to go. I have the students go and refill their water for the next class if that's what we're doing. Or if we're all done, I have them dump their water and stack the trays. I just keep the sponges in there. I find that it works pretty easily that way, and then put other things away as I need to. So hopefully that was helpful and answers any questions you might have had about our painting procedures in the art room.